Uncertainty grips industries, no thanks to the coronavirus pandemic. A sudden halt of consumer appetite means little or no demand, which forced many to close shops. As one of the most affected industries, the fashion world is preparing for a reboot. Fashion weeks and various events have been cancelled or postponed over the past few months. Design houses are facing an uphill struggle putting together their upcoming collections while reeling from significant losses. So how can the fashion industry survive the pandemic? Earlier, I spoke with Simon Collins, a fashion guru and an educator. Here are some of his thoughts. And I'm joined by Simon Collins, founder of We Design and the ex-dean of fashion school from Parsons, the New School of Design. What a pleasure seeing you, sir, Mr. Collins.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I've always been wondering about how the fashion world people are surviving and thriving during the pandemic. Looking at you and the backdrop you have, I probably have an idea already.
Well, you know, the pandemic may do lots of things, but it doesn't stop you caring about fashion. If it's inside you, then it's inside you, and you really can't control it.
That's very true, what you just said. I will remember that. Having said that, though, we see fashion and the idea of fashion might be evolving as people are dealing with public health issues. I just want to throw you with a minor example of myself. I don't have to prepare too many fancy pants. I can just sit in front of Zoom every day and talking to people. So how is the fashion world evolving as a result of consumers' needs?
Well, you know, the French have a saying, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, which means the more things change, the more they stay the same. The fact is, everything has changed now in fashion. Everything has changed. And yet, we still want to look great. We still want to buy clothes. We still want things because that's the nature of who we are. You know, we don't buy things purely for need. We buy things because we want them. We want to feel special. You know, fashion's about communication. We want to communicate who we are with what we wear. And so certainly the pandemic has changed attitudes. The fashion world is completely different, but also it's still the same.
What are the differences? That's very interesting. How do you, as a guru in fashion world, how do you look at that, the differences?
Well, I think that there's a little bit less room for frivolity right now. You know, we don't have the same disposable income that we had before, and we're a little bit more aware of the fragility of life. And so perhaps we're taking things a little bit more seriously, but I don't think that's going to change us long term. On the industry side, things are different. You know, the fact is the industry has been functioning much the same way as it had been for more than 100 years. You can't go on like that indefinitely.
There are a lot of things going on all at the same time. You might say it does not have a direct impact on the fashion world, but it does have an impact. For example, you know, the future changes of global supply chains, the technologies and its impact on either the platform to interact about fashion and sell to consumers, or about fabrics, about the way to continue with the fashion development and also innovation. You also have very different cultures now trying to celebrate them, but at the same time somewhat globalized. So all of these are changing. And also people's way of looking at what is beautiful might be changing too as a result of public health issues. People like the glamour, but these days, many of us like something much closer to the world, to the nature. So, Mr. Collins, there are a lot of ideas change as a result of the mega trends, as we say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there are three core elements that are changing, and everyone must embrace them, whether they even realize it or not. And those three elements are sustainability. There's no question about it. The world has to embrace sustainability, and the smart countries, the smart people, the smart brands, they are embracing it. Technology. Technology enables us to do things like sustainability. And any company that's not embracing technology, it's beyond me why they would not be doing that. And finally, diversity. And by diversity, I mean, of course, the simple concept of diversity, but I think more than that, caring for our communities, caring for people. I actually think that China has a distinct advantage here as well.
Tell me more about that.
Well, China has the ability to innovate very quickly. I would say quicker than any other country that I've worked in. And so I think when a good idea comes up, it may be Chinese, it may be from some other parts of the world, but when a good idea comes up, China has this incredible ability to innovate and respond quickly. And of course, we have the logistics in China to make big things happen very quickly. And I think that's a significant advantage when it comes to adjusting to the inevitable onslaught of sustainability. Which, I mean, that's why I spend so much time working in China, because I'm inspired by what's going on.
Tell me more about what inspired you and why is it important for an artist and also an educator, a fashion guru like you, to work with some of the most dynamic market. What is feeding you? What kinds of information? What kind of inspiration? Meanwhile, what are you providing also during this process?
Yeah. See, I can't do things that I don't believe in. You know, I'm too old to waste my time banging my head against the wall.
You're not old
I go
at
to places,
all, but
I was fishing for a
vitality.
compliment there. No, but you know, I can't waste my time. And so I go to China, I work in China because I feel the energy there. I feel the enthusiasm for learning. And yeah, lots of other countries have enthusiasm, but not at the same scale.
So a lot of things also going on in the world of fashion in China. We see designers that are becoming international. We also see designers that are more digging into the culture and tradition of China, trying to get inspirations. We also see designers, as you say, the Generation Z, it's almost the same as their counterparts anywhere else in the world. So how do you see this generational differences? Well, at the same time, the things that inspire these designers, how are you working with them about all of those factors?
Well, I found over the last 10 to 15 years teaching in China, it was very clear to me early on what the immense talent was, the young people and the talent that they have. And of course, now that everyone has every bit of information in the world on their phone, there's no lack of inspiration, you know. So I recognized that early on. But the challenge at the time was that Chinese industry was not really embracing the homegrown talent. And indeed, Chinese consumers were looking for Western brands. Now that's changed. If you go to one of the high-end luxury shopping malls in China, it used to be 90% Western. Now it's maybe 50% Western, which means 50% of it is domestic brands. Now that to me tells me the consumer is now much more interested in a domestic brand. Then you come to industry. The industry used to only try to hire designers that were international. That's all they wanted. Now I think that's opening up.
What about the international market? How are they embracing the Chinese designers or, you know, designers in Asia with China as one of those important corners?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book when I was at Parsons, and it was called 30 Parsons Designers.
Yes.
And I interviewed 30 most notable designers that had been through the school. A third of them were Asian, and most of them were Chinese. And they've been working in every design team around the world for years. But it's just, no one really talked about it. I remember, actually, the New York Times did an article on Asian designers when I was the dean at Parsons, and they interviewed me, and I said, look, we don't see color here. We just see students. We have no interest in where they're from, what nationality they are, what race or anything. We just see students. And so we weren't going to be drawn on was there a particular talent of Chinese designers. You know, I have to tell you, there's a certain confidence in China that's been rising this past decade. And I feel like it's palpable in the students. You know, they recognize the value of their own culture, and they want to embrace that. They no longer feel the need to prove that they're Chinese, which I think is really good. It's really healthy. You don't have to prove you're Chinese. You already are. You know, your culture is within you. Your background already informs who you are as a designer. And when they bring that, I think Jason Wu is a great example. When they bring that design talent to their work, it doesn't have to look Chinese to be great Chinese design.
It's very interesting, that point, Mr. Collins, because you've been hearing this debate here in China and elsewhere in the world. What is the Chineseness, right? And whether that should be, quote-unquote, reflected in everything a Chinese designer or a Chinese contemporary artist is doing. So you do not, it seems, subscribe to that idea.
I definitely do not. You know, any more than Calvin Klein has to look American, Louis Vuitton has to look French, Prada has to look Italian. They don't. They look international. And if you want to be international, you've got to look international, right? It's okay if there are elements of Chinese culture in your work, and that's a beautiful thing. And there will be if you're Chinese. But you don't have to prove you're Chinese. And that's different to saying that you shouldn't use Chinese culture. Of course you should. You should embrace it, you should respect it, and you should enjoy it. And if it happens to be part of who you are as a designer, that's wonderful. I have nothing but respect for that. But you just don't have to prove it with everything. Because I remember 15 years ago teaching students, and they would say, I've done this collection, but I need to make it look more Chinese. And I would say, why? I don't understand why you have to do that.
What are some of the brands or some of the works, specific works or moments you most impressed or remember well about a designer coming from this part of the world, and something there in it that becomes an identity, but at the same time becomes a bridge?
There's a handful of designers who I know fairly well from China, who I've got the deepest respect for, and I love their work. Tian Wei is one of them. Tian Wei, she studied internationally. She works in Shanghai. Her collection uses very beautiful international fabrics. It's all made in Shanghai, and it's of the very, very highest quality. It's absolutely beautiful. She shows on the New York runway, and it fits in seamlessly with international brands. Then you've got someone like Marshall Ma. And Marshall Ma also studied internationally, but felt very much like a Chinese designer. So came back to Shanghai. She established her business in Shanghai. She shows in Paris, but she shows in Paris for business reasons. She's a Chinese designer. Then you've got Lu Yan. So Lu Yan's collection, Comme Moi. So Lu Yan is the famous supermodel. And again, she felt very much like a Chinese designer and wanted to. She realized what fashion is. She knows how to do it. And she wanted to do that in Shanghai. And so she does. And it's a beautiful example of what a collection can be. Grace Chen, another example. Grace, again, studied internationally, but has really a Chinese version of haute couture. And she does it from this beautiful mansion in Shanghai. So there are so many different elements of Chinese design that I think are world-class, every bit as good as anybody else in the world. I just think that we're working on getting people to respect that globally.
A lot of diversity you just mentioned, and it happens just many of them are my great friends. And I know,
I'm sure.
On a personal basis,
I hope I'm your great friend now.
yes, how hard they are working in order to bring out the identity of their brand to the public, and also how hard they want to serve as a bridge between China and the world, in fact, through their fashion works.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I do think that's a very critical element, and never more so than right now today. Because I think that we, meaning the West and China, have so much in common. We have so much to learn from each other, so much to share with each other. There's so much richness and joy in working together and getting to know each other better. And I think those designers are great examples of that. I certainly try to do that with my work. I love nothing more than being in China with my friends, learning about the culture, sharing my English background, my American work, the other global elements of what I do. And I think that both parties become so much richer, so much happier through better knowledge and understanding of each other. And certainly in my work, one of the most critical things I try to do is increase that awareness, be a bridge.
Mr. Collins, we have seen a lot of new development in our world. Earlier, the Chinese brand, the Chinese designer, come onto the world stage with a sense of freshness, even a sense of exoticism, and a sense of diversity and vitality that goes with what the image of China is like for the rest of the world. Now, because I'm dealing with geopolitics every day in my work, through conversations with people around the world to talk about the pandemic, talk about the economy, you certainly have seen China's image has been evolving in people's eyes. That could be temporary. That could be for some time to come. So how do you see, the world of art, the world of fashion, also as a result being impacted or free from it?
I think I give a lot of speeches around the world, and one of the critical things I like to try and get across to people is it's not what you say, it's what people hear. And what I mean by that is, I can say it's hot today, because for me it's hot. To you, it might be quite cool, because if you're in Shanghai, it's 35 degrees, which is far, far hotter. So the point is, it's not what I say, it's what you're experiencing. So when a designer communicates something, what they think they're communicating might not be what the recipient is hearing or seeing. And so I think that with Chinese creativity, as I've said already, there is immense creativity. There's the most wonderful design work coming out of China. but it's not always necessarily understood by the wider world, which is a shame, and I recognize it, other people don't. And so I think one of the things that I've tried to do over the last decade is work with Chinese companies to help them to understand how to communicate with the rest of the world. It's not about changing what you do. You know, the work that's done in China is beautiful and it doesn't have to change. The point is that sometimes you need to communicate in a slightly different way just to get your point across.
Mr. Collins, I know you've been involving in the American society with Asian Americans and with Chinese Americans. You've been hosting and supporting the China Gala, one of the biggest events of the year for the Chinese community in the United States. Many of the biggest names are there. So tell me more about how at this critical juncture, you know, between China and the United States, and at this critical juncture of our world, do you think we could do together?
I think the China Gala is the most incredible example of the reality of the relationship between the US and China. We love each other. We just do. We're very close friends. We are intrinsically linked, business-wise, culturally, economically, in every conceivable way. Along the way, there's occasionally someone who tries to, you know, create friction. Unfortunately, we have one in our country right now. But it doesn't matter. It will pass, and then we'll go back to remembering that we're friends again. And I think the China Gala is a great example of the best of our relationship. The Yusai Khan, who's an icon, Yusai Khan conceived of it, put it together. Her team do a spectacular job running it, supporting the China Institute here in the US. And it's my honor to be a goodwill ambassador for the China Institute and a good friend of Yusai, and to do what I can to help in the hosting. So, you know, as I say, the whole thing celebrates the intrinsic links between our two great countries, and gives an opportunity for people in the US to see the best of what's going on in China. For example, the first year we had Guo Pei doing her collection, which, yes. I mean, Guo Pei, she's amazing. We had Grace Chen, you know, we had Jason Wu last time. We've had so many wonderful people showing their collections. And it's just this one, you know, it's one night, but it's a wonderful way of bringing together the people that really love the bonds between our two great nations, right, and celebrating that. And finding ways like, you know, bringing somebody like me in that already had a passion for China, and now I have yet another reason to talk about it and to engage. So it's, you know, it's like one of those gifts that keeps on giving, and everybody wins.
Exactly. We need everybody to win, indeed. And to win it with beauty,
we do.
With the best fashion ever.
That's right, that's right. You know, we have so much in common, we really do. And every time I go to China, I find more and more. And it never ceases to, like, you know what, one thing that drives me crazy is that people don't realize the creativity that goes on in China, in the rest of the world. They think that China's a great workshop, you know, it can manufacture, it can do these other things, but they don't realize the raw talent. And I like a fight. I like having a fight with people in the West when they say, well, China, you know, does this. I'm like, you want to do that with me? I'll tell you what's going on there. And so, you know, the China Gala is yet another example for me of the best of what's happening in China. And I can use that in my arguments with people about the reality of what's going on.
You know, Mr. Collins, those are politically minded might be saying, oh, you are politically incorrect these days, you know. China is not anymore, you know, the most desired place because there are a lot of geopolitics. And they would warn you. What would you say?
I've spent enough time in China to feel like I have a good sense of what's going on. And quite honestly, I don't know which country should be casting the first stone right now, because I think every country has problems. And, you know, there are times when you look at certain countries and you think, wow, like New Zealand, for example. New Zealand is doing a wonderful job, and it seems to be a very, very desirable place to be. You know, some of the Scandinavian countries, the same thing. But, you know, for everybody else, we live in the real world. You know, our countries do good things, we do some things that are not quite so good. You know, I don't think anyone's really got the moral high ground at this point. You know, I don't love everything about any country. But, you know, I like a lot of things about China. I like a lot of things about the US. I guess I spend my days looking for the best in both countries, right?
Beautifully said. I would do that too, to look for the beautiful things in every country and make sure they can spread around.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Simon Collins, founder of We Design and also ex-dean of the fashion school, Parsons, the new School of Design. Thank you so much, sir. All the best, and be a good host.
Thank you.
Simon Collins, a fashion guru and an educator, talking about his interactions with his Chinese counterparts.